All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Uli Brückner. I'm a Jean Monnet Chair for European Studies and the Academic Director at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you back after the food for some more food for thought. We heard a lot about challenges in the morning and will now change the perspective a little bit to focus more on how the challenges are perceived and what do we do to win the hearts and minds and what can we do to improve communication, because that seems to be in the 21st century of utmost importance, not only how to invest in hardware, but also how to convince everyone involved in potential conflicts, how to deal with the perception of reality. As we in academia learn from social constructivism, that reality is not only what we measure, but reality is also how we talk about it. And when we look at different times, every time has its warfare, its speak and way of doing it. And it seems as if at this time of the 21st century, hybrid warfare is the thing to discuss in its multiple dimensions. And what could be better to look at a multidimensional problem from a multidimensional point of view. And if we look at the region that is at the focus of this conference, then it makes perfect sense to represent the region by the various representatives that joined me here on the panel. So from left to right, it's my pleasure to introduce Rear Admiral Mitko Petev, who's the commander of the Bulgarian Navy. Next to him is Professor Mikhail Stanchev, an expert in the field of foreign policy at the National University from Kharkiv in the Ukraine. Right next to me is Gitsu Kalitze, a civil servant from the Ministry of Environmental and Natural Resources of Georgia, who first agreed to talk about ISIS, but as a man of many qualities, he stepped in and promised to give the perspective from his country on hybrid warfare. And I'm also very pleased that since we had a very straightforward male, elderly, senior perspective on security questions, that we are now slightly genderly balanced now. Right next to me is Victoria Bukatura, a program director from the Foreign Policy Association of Moldova, and a journalist based in Turkey, but of Bulgarian origin, Nahide Deniz. And last but not least, what is originally presented as an intervention at the end of our panel, but what we now do due to flight constraints, Stephen Meringer from the NATO headquarters in Brussels came with us, and he will start with the question. So please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. I appreciate your interest and your attention in NATO's digital outreach. I also wanted to send a thank you to Solomon Passy for his support on my visit in the last couple of days, and also for his photo gallery that we saw earlier. I thought that was fantastic. It shows what an incredible life he has led. And while his hairstyle has changed many, many times over the years, his dedication to his nation is still as strong as ever. So thank you, Solomon, for all your help. My name is Stephen Meringer. I'm the head of communication services in the public diplomacy division of NATO. My team is focused on what I call digital outreach because we're managing all of the technology, social media, the website, radio, television, broadcasting, content creation, content distribution, marketing, all of the facets of our content creation as well as distribution. So it was not that long ago when Secretary General de Hoopscheffer made the comment that in terms of communication, NATO was operating in the Stone Age, that we had no ability to show our work in the field, and that we had a very weak presence on the internet. That was the beginning of the change that NATO has gone under in its communications. That's when my section was formed, my post was created. I'm honored to be the first person to hold my post for NATO, to have been brought in to make communications change happen for NATO. And I'm proud to say, in 5 years, we have changed how NATO communicates to the world. We are now maintaining pace with how the world is communicating, which is a very big statement to be able to make for the Alliance. Because typically, the Alliance has run very, very far behind in terms of technology development. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our approach is one of integrated communications, making sure that we're using the right channels, using the right technologies, speaking the right languages on these channels, making sure that we are where the audiences are and not expecting them to come to us. That was one of NATO's failings for a very long time. We were broadcasting information in the NATO language, speaking in terms that the public simply can't understand, and NATO assumed that the public was interested, that they understood it, and that they would come to us. And that is simply not the case. You need to be where people are communicating, and communicating today the way the world is communicating. Next slide, please. This is very quickly a breakdown of my section. It's a two-pillar approach. On the left is the Communications Technology Center. This is the team managing the channels for our communication. On the right is Editorial Services, our team of content creators, information managers, our team of video journalists working for NATO Channel, our marketing capacity. We've also created a new post recently this year called the Head of Digital Insight. A much better job of focusing on assessment and evaluation and measurement of our digital outreach. If you're going to be doing digital outreach, you must be sure you have an evaluation method in place. Next slide, please. Our primary approach in changing NATO's communication has been through storytelling instead of broadcasting information. When I was doing my recruitment to take my post at NATO, and I looked at the NATO website, and the web stories would start saying, on this date, this acronym met with this other acronym to talk about this acronym. Nobody's going to read that. Nobody is hearing that message. Nobody is connecting with that story. You need to compel people with quality content, quality channels, and quality storytelling. And that's an approach of visual, emotional, and informational. You craft your content to try to hit these targets. It's a much more natural connection with an audience. It's an organic connection. They're drawn in at an emotional level before they even realize it. And it's a much more effective way to connect with an audience. Next slide, please, I think. Okay, I'm sorry, go back. Go back one. I need to introduce this. So go back. Thank you, sorry. So I'm going to show a couple examples, a couple recent examples of exercise that took place in October and November. 35,000 NATO troops across Italy, Spain, and Portugal. Now, NATO telling was more human interest focused, sort of feature type stories. But as you're aware of the change in the international environment, the tone of NATO has changed as well. And Trident Juncture was an excellent opportunity for us to tell that story and to show, please.
Contact fire! Contact fire! Feel box! Feel left!
So, very short, a sense of drama. Thank you. A bit of a sense of drama, very assertive. But is that telling a story? Did you see the story there? Because it's not traditional storytelling. But you don't want to do traditional storytelling anymore. Across any form of communication that you're using today, videos, web stories, infographics, press releases. You can tell a story, but you have to have that in your mind in the beginning. So what is that video, that very short video, what is the story there? Deterrence, assurance, readiness, capacity building, operability. It's the readiness action plan. In 30 seconds, we're sending a multitude of messages to different audiences with different impacts. So, now it goes back to another, I have another example to show as well. Come on, baby.
Every soldier together. It's unique and they have to
which is a key element of the wrap. That video also showed our approach to production. We're using a lot of the new camera technologies to help tell our stories. We're using drones to get good aerial footage. Do we have it? Okay.
special forces come from the maritime, the air, every soldier together. It's a kind of joint, unique capability, and they have the mission in general to conduct very challenging operations, to create dominance in a certain area where it is very tense, and they are real warriors to take on a duty if called upon by the nations.
Readiness and also in that you see our approach to production, much sharper editing, using music that helps enhance the content but not too much. You don't want the music to overtake the elements. The different camera angles that we're using cameras and we're using drones to capture amazing aerial footage. Just 2 weeks ago we posted our first 360 video, which gives you an inside look at a Romanian MiG fighter jet in flight. So we're working on the new technologies to bring the action of the alliance to our publics. Okay, so now we're talking social media. This shows the trends for NATO from the beginning of 2014 till today, effectively. We're now well over 1.1 million on Facebook, more than 350,000 on Twitter, and just over 10 million views on YouTube. Those are really good results for NATO. I can show this to my bosses and say, see, the interest is very high for NATO on social media. The opportunities are enormous, but NATO must embrace digital as a core communications capacity to make this work as effectively as it possibly could, and as much as it needs to against our adversaries. Next slide, please. We are working to counter Russian misinformation where we can. We have our challenges, primarily in resources. Our resources are vastly outmanned by the resources that Russia has put into its misinformation efforts, both in terms of funding as well as personnel. We also don't want to get into the same game that Russia's playing. We don't want to play the misinformation game. So what we're doing is we're countering the misinformation with fact. And this is a series of infographics that we created called Debunking Russian Myths. This was created from rather mundane, generic press and media information. And my team took that information, related it into this content, translated that more institutional information, media, and that's a big part of the role of my team, is translating NATO's complicated decisions and policies into a language that the public can understand. These did quite well for us. They were quite popular for a period of time. Next slide, please. We also created a website where line by line on Russia's misinformation. So we show, and then what we're saying is true. Where we can, more strategic. One of the real challenges is Russia can say and do anything it wants, and no one holds them accountable. NATO and the nations, we have on that. Anything they want. How we respond in our community, please. Tone of voice is very important, of course. I often get the question about NATO on social media. Aren't you worried about protecting NATO's brand? And I say, no, NATO's brand can pretty much take care of itself. It is what it is. I'm more concerned that we protect NATO's posture. Know who we are, know where we stand, and be firm with that. But within that posture, still plenty of room for innovation, creativity, and experimentation. Here's a couple of decent examples, I think. The one on the right, the top right, is when we reached 500,000 followers on Facebook, and my team wanted to acknowledge that milestone. And so they came up with a few proposals, and we went with the, we're not cute kittens, but we reached 500,000. And of course, there was a cute kitten picture beside that graphic as well. People really like that. They really connected with that. But again, the one on the bottom right, that's the first tweet from the US Central Intelligence Agency when they went onto Twitter in the summer of 2014. Neither confirm nor deny that this is the second highest of all time. So think about that. The first step that the Central Intelligence Agency took on social media, because they understood that concept of tone of voice, but that issue, that idea of flexibility within that tone of voice. And then this one on the left is from the Canadian mission to NATO. They put this out last year. This went viral in Canada, absolutely. Just clearly illustrating where's Russia, where's not Russia, in case anyone along the borders there is getting lost. So tone of voice is very important. Know who you are, what stands for. But within that posture, find the room for innovation, creativity, experiment. Even a little sense of humor can be very valuable sometimes. Next slide, please. You have to be out in front, managing your message, your image, and your perception with these new communications channels. Next slide, please. Because if you're not doing it, you know what's going to happen. Someone else is going to do it for you. Guarantee it, especially in this day and age. The internet is full of people looking for information voids to fill for their own reasons. It can be for personal reasons, it can be for political reasons, it can be for financial reasons. But there's people looking for information voids to fill. So if you're not there managing your message, someone's going to do it for you. The NATO Facebook page is a perfect example of that. When we were looking at what we wanted to do for NATO on social media in 2010, we found a gentleman in Denmark who had created a NATO fan page on Facebook. and he would post random NATO news, and he had about 7,000 followers when we found him. And I had my team reach out to him because I said, there must be a way we can partner with him. There has to be a synergy there to work with what he's already created. And he went, you can have it if you want it. I just created it because it wasn't there. So this is a guy on his own time handed NATO the cornerstone. The Facebook page we're using today is the very same one that he gave us in 2010. Fortunately, he was working in our best interest. Odds are, if someone is managing your message for you, they're not going to be working in your advantage. So be in place first. You maintain a strategic advantage by being in place first. Next slide, please. And then it's the why. Why do we be needing to do this? First point, NATO needs social media way more than social media needs us. That's for sure. It's become a core communications channel. We now have an online community of more than 1.5 million followers. And we see the results from that in everything that we do. We get more results in everything that we do for public diplomacy because of what we're doing on our digital outreach. It requires organizations and governments and agencies to be nimble and flexible and ready to respond to the changes in the technology and the changes in the messaging. We must recognize the empowering factor of social media. It can empower an organization and a government or an agency, but it can also equally empower one single individual. And we can never lose sight of that because we never know where that one individual might pop up on what topic. Again, requiring us to be nimble and flexible and ready to respond. We recently did a review of NATO-wide communications, across the alliance, both at the headquarters, the commands, the agencies, the delegations as well. We're all taking part in this review. One of the very strong recommendations that came back was that NATO must, on par with its investment in military capacity, also invest in its communications capacity. NATO has had a tendency to build up communications when a crisis happens, and then when things go quiet, they pull it back down again. We must build a strong foundation to carry us into the future. Most importantly, governments, organizations, international organizations, agencies, we have to be able to move quickly. We cannot be stuck in the bureaucratic mud that keeps our organizations from moving faster. And all leadership must recognize that need to be quick and to invest correctly. Next slide, please. So, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and thank you so much for listening. And I wish you a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stephen. It could not have been any better after lunch when the blood sugar level is not ideal to have such an energetic and very visual way of getting us back on track. I would love to start a discussion, but as I said before, we have to catch a flight. And given the fact that there are so many communication channels available, I'm pretty sure that if you have a question, you find ways to send them to Stephen. In our journey around the Black Sea, we continue with the Ukraine. Professor we did not come, we stay in Bulgaria and we start with a report presented by Admiral Mitkov-Petev, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Bruckner, for introduction. So I will go a little closer to the topic of hybrid warfare. I think it will be heard better from this stage. I will go a little bit closer to the hybrid warfare and propaganda campaigns as a topic. And of course, I will start going closer to the meaning of the hybrid warfare. I have restrained myself from using slides because of the short time available. And of course, I will provide more time for the next speakers for their valuable insights. So what is really hybrid warfare? Hybrid warfare, according to the NATO definition, is application of the non-military and military means using regular, non-regular military forces, paramilitary forces, all spectrum of financial, economic tools in order to achieve the objective of the strategy. In short, so-called the Daimfeld model of the state power is under attack. Daimfeld's first letters of the following pillars of the statehood power, which is diplomatic, information, military, economics, finance, intelligence, and legislation. So you see, when we're talking about the hybrid, we have something mixed, and this is the most important, that all these tools are used simultaneously, not one after another or in some sequences, and additional to this, also in very adaptive way. So we need definitely military power, but this is not the sole source of power. For example, information, where propaganda strategy will fit, is also equally important. And vice versa, without military element of the hybrid warfare, the opponent will lose opportunity to escalate the conflict. And this will go back to the situation when the threat of using military power is the power itself. Definitely hybrid warfare are fought in some physical battle spaces there, like sea, land, cyber, space, but also it is fought on the conceptual battlefields for the minds and hearts of the peoples, as it has been mentioned earlier. For this reason, propaganda campaigns are very important, and in the real world, very often, not the reality, but the perception is what's running the decision making. So if you have perception that you are strong, you will be treated as like strong person. On the other hand, if you are weak, doesn't matter, or the perception is that you are weak, doesn't matter how strong you are, at least you will be checked by other tools. For this reason, it is very important, the propaganda campaigns, to be countered very early in this stage. Talking about the applicable hybrid strategy, I will like to point out so-called Gerasimov hybrid warfare strategy, which has been introduced in 2013 in November during the General Assembly of the Academy of the Military Science in Moscow. And General Gerasimov, this is the Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, mentioned that usually the hybrid warfare, the hybrid tools, proportion military 4-to-1, so 4 measures military, non-military, and only 1 military. And the first phase of this conflict will start definitely with the information operation. And it's very interesting that in Russian terms, there is no difference between the information space, like cyber, so the information itself. But what is more important? Of course, the most important part is the interface, which are the people. How the things can go to the people directly. So in this case, application of proactive propaganda strategy will apply the Sun Tzu quote that the acme of the art of war is to defeat your enemy without war fighting. How we can counter this kind of threat? Of course, it has been said very good in an excellent manner by the speaker before me, but it's very important to keep in mind that countering any narrative in the daily base is very important to keep the credibility and the trust of the public for the state and also for its military. So for me, there is no separation between military power, between propaganda, between information, and all other tools which are applicable in this struggle. Finally, to point out that there are several tiers, two general tiers in the hybrid warfare. One is on the military and non-military, and then also the second one is on the engagement level. We have already conventional and non-conventional struggle using regular and irregular forces. In the both stages, propaganda campaigns are very dangerous. For this reason, we have to counter this timely in order to be able to respond in time of crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commander. Since we only have 30 minutes left and 4 speakers to go, we will postpone the questions and answers in one block at the very end and continue with Professor Stanchev. With a perspective on the Ukraine, the floor is yours.
Уважаеми дами и господа, ако ми позволите, ще бъда, макар и съм от Украйна, ще говоря на български. Ще ме извините за грешките, които най-вероятно ще имам. Понеже времето е доста малко за изказването ми, преди един месец тук изнасях една лекция публична за хибридната война, затова само ще се концентрирам върху основните тези на пропагандната война на Русия срещу Украйна. Първото, което започна, че Украйна не е държава, няма държавност както такава. Подобна реплика беше хвърлена по отношение към Казахстан. Няма да се очуди, ако утре ще се появи подобно по отношение към Беларус. Затова 25 години, тази година навършва Украйна, това е вече държавност със свои външна политика, вътрешна и така. Можем да критикуваме, да се съгласяваме, да не се... Но това е самостоятелна държава. Ако погледнем историята, да се върнем 18-та година Украинската народна република, призната по силата на Брестския договор, призната от Съветска Русия и в течение на 20 век Украинска социалистическа република, макар че не е самостоятелна държавност и административно национално образуване. Да не говорим, да се върнем пак обратно в историята. Запорожското казачество, Запорожската държава, която си беше една предпоставка за украинската държавност. И така нареченият хетманат по време на Иван Мазепа. Това си беше самостоятелно автономно образуване, макар че е зависимо от московската държава. Да не говоря, че най-накрая за Киевската Русь. Това беше европейска държава, начало с Ярослав Мудри, който се умя да направи една много мъдра политика, да омъжи своите дъщери за първите короновани особи в Европа и по този начин да получи един много почетен титул „Тестът на Европа“. Така че относно държава, Украйна държава или не, разбирате. Аз само давам факти, без да коментирам, без да правя извод. Обаче това активно се използва срещу нас, точно в пропагандния смисъл. Втората теза. Във връзката с анексия на Крим, руската пропаганда твърди, че това е исконно руска земя. Да, вярно е. По време на Екатерина II, 1774 година, ликвидация на Кримското ханство, ликвидация на Запорожското казачество, благодарение на Суворов, който разпръсна украинските казаци на Кубан и тук за Дунава, естествено, че тази част на Украйна влезе в рамките на Руската империя. Обаче, ако спорим за Крим, на кого принадлежи Крим, значит, трябва да започнем от кимерийците. 8 и 7 век преди Христа, това са кимерийски територии. След това таврите, откъдето е самото название Таврида или Таврийска империя, губерния. След това е да се спомни прабългарите по време на Ханко, брат. По време на Велика България, това беше прабългарска държава. След това генуезската колонизация, гръцката колонизация, известна със своите градове Херсонес, Пантикапей и Олвия и така нататък. Така че на кого принадлежи Крим? Само е руски ли? Изконно руски ли? Ами от 18-та година по силата пак на Брестския договор Крим става украински. И Русия го признава. Го признава и съветската Русия. Право, че 1925 година даваме Таганрог и част от Ростовската област, това е бивша Донецка губерния, даваме на Русия. 1954 година Съветския съюз връща Крим към Украинската съветска република в смисъл административно, териториално и юридически. Така че този пропаганден бренд, който се използва активно, и аз тук го чувам и в България, ама Крим нали изконно руска земя. И тогава да сметнем, всеки един има право да претендира на Крим, в това число и Османската империя, която 3 века фактически влияеше чрез Кримското ханство от 1441 година до 1783 година. Обаче това се използва доста прямолинейно и пропагандни средства. Третата теза. Така наречено положение на руското малцинство в Украйна и притискането на руски език. Аз съм рускоговорящи украинец от български произход. Моите предци са се преселили в Руската империя преди 200 години, след Дибич за Балкански, Руската война. И ние вече 200 години живеем тук в румънското, в съветското, в украинското, в руско и така нататък. Аз станах студент в Харковския университет, завършил съм го, преподавам до ден днешен на руски език. Никой не ми е казал, ама защо не преподаваш на украински? Никой не ми е казал, не преподавай на руски. Сега в момента, в моя факултет, аз съм завеждащ катедра по най-нова история, едни си говорят на украински, това е тяхното право и никой не може да им забрани. Другите студенти си говорят на руски. Правят доклади на този и на други. Дори в телевизията водещия е рускоязичен, участниците говорят на украински. Никакъв проблем няма. Обаче тезата е използвана в пропаганда в смисъл, че да защитаваме руското население в украинската, особено юго-истока на Украина. Ще дам само няколко цифри. В Руската федерация има 10 училища на 2 милиона украинци с преподаването на украински език. В Украина 1256 училища с руски език, където се учат 700 хиляди ученици. В Руската федерация има 7 украиноязични вестници, които ги закриха, за съжаление, по време на кризата. В Русия казах, извинявайте. В Украина 1176 вестница на руски език. В Русия едно и украиноязично предаване по радиото. В Украина 74% радио и телевизия са на руски език. Аз като бивш депутат помня си първата сесия, когато започнах да говоря за притискането на руски език. И аз попитах колегите си. Погледнете на ръководството на кметството. Те са украинци, обаче не знаят украински. Аз съм българин, но аз научих в посолство и в външното, не вейки в тази страна, да не знаят на Русия, сега да кажа, че ама език руски никой не аз лично с Путин. Дори той да не седи срещу вас. Се приема всичко само от него и нищо. И второ, което може би НАТО трябва да се получи от Русия. Докато се приемат такива или други решения, Русия го приема веднага 11 март, така наречен референдум, а след един ден Крим е присъединен към територията на Руската федерация. Освен това, ситуацията в Крим и в Донбас естествено не може да ни безпокои от гледна точка на сигурността на региона. Русия иска едно, да се отменят санкциите, да им разблокират сметките в западните банки и ще продължават да се правят това, което си искат. Аз все пак вярвам, че ще има някаква диалога не само между Русия и Европа, и НАТО, но и между самата Русия и Украина. Но не бих бил до края обективен, ако не кажа, че и от Украина сега особено много зависи ние се опитвахме откровенно да дадем сигнали на... Когато отменихме, се отказахме, казаха ни същото. Критерии и на друг... Аз разбирам НАТО. Не искат да конфронти заради с Русия. Но очакването на украинците паднаха много долу. Последните социологични проучвания 57% за НАТО, а сред младежите 78%. Мисля, че след това, когато поредния път НАТО ушки му обещава, но казва, че провеждаме нашите сътрудничества. Благодарен, помогнаха. Облекло с техника определена, с инструктаж, дори когато аз 3 дена преди да дойда насам бях на Донбас и питах, какво мнение имате за украинската армия, защото най-различно беше. Каза, вижте какво, преди 1 година това беше ушки армия. За сега гледаме добре облечени войници, с добри командири, професионално ги ръководят. И каза, те имат повече от нас на бойната машина, например, дори имало американски килимчета и английски ръкомойници, за да си миеш ръцете. Така че от техническа гледна точка, да. Но има и още едно нещо. От гледна точка на психологията и на менталитета и на руснаците и на украинците. Аз вярвам, че нито украинците, нито руснаците искат да воюват един срещу друг. И това се потвърждава в редица факти на Донбас. Аз говорех с много хора и от другата и от тази страна. Дори се стига до там, че се предупреждават един друг, че ще има бомбардировка да се крият. Има с факти, конкретни, когато след бомбардировка на определени обекти помагат на мирните жители да погасят пожара или още не. Това е голям сигнал, важен сигнал за политическите кръгове и от двете страни. Ние искаме да говорим с Русия, се опитваме да го правим, поне в минския формат. За съжаление, не винаги става. Не винаги Москва и политическото ръководство в Русия, аз имам отбора на Путин, иска да чува това, което им казват. И това, което може и ще се води този диалог, и Русия ще даде сигнал, че иска сигурността в Черноморския регион и така нататък. Но нямайте илюзия, че това ще стане много лесно. Много бавно. Се говори едно, се прави друго и поредният опит на Русия да направи заседанието на ПАЧЕС в Москва е точно желанието да се заявят, че ние сме велика държава и искаме да се върнем на геополитическото пространство в Европа и в света, но ще го правят от своя позиция и дано да чуят какво говорят и другите страни, за да достигне един разумен компромис и да се избегнат човеческите жертви. Защото във всяка една хибридна война преди всичко страдат обикновените хора, които искат едно – да се спрят военните действия, да се върнат 1 милион 700 бежанци, които отидат в Русия, в Украина и започват да се връщат обратно, защото нито там. Моите приятели, жена емигрира в Русия, на 24 април, след 2 дена, се връща в Харков. Защо? Ще я питам. Явно очаквала нещо друго. Благодаря ви за вниманието.
Thank you very much, Professor Stanchev. And since we are really short of time, we just continue with a picture from Georgia.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gizo Chelidze. I'm representing the Ministry of Environment of Georgia, International Relations and EU Integration Division Department. And from other side, I'm also representing several Georgian universities, Tbilisi State University, International Black Sea University. I'm delivering international relations lectures at those universities. I think the forum we are attending now is quite interesting, and it is quite challenging, and I think it could be quite fruitful because such kind of conferences create good and solid basement for shaping public policy, international policy, foreign policy of different stakeholders and states involved in the international relations. Our session is called Hybrid War and Propaganda, and our moderator said that I was going in the beginning to be part of next session regarding ISIS, but I decided to talk about ISIS in my small speech today, and I would like to more generalized talk about the hybrid war and the propaganda. I will focus on four topics. This will be one about Georgia and Georgia's part in the region. I would like to shortly say some few my opinions about actually itself, the region, Black Sea region. I would like to talk about the hybrid war and the propaganda. My colleagues, previous colleagues, talked about lots of, reviewed lots of issues here and what should be done to avoid threats and what should be done from different perspectives, the threats that we face today. I would like to say a few words about what not to be done, what we should not do, and what are the mistakes we are making in our way when we are in fighting against terrorism, against we are involved in a hybrid war. As my previous presenter said, the hybrid war is a unique war that is taking place at the moment. And it is very hard war to, because we don't have one battlefield, we have lots of battlefields, we have multiple threats. We never know when and where threat will appear and what kind of threat it will be. We are not some threats, and we have seen of the terrorist acts in Europe just. So the problem is quite clear, quite obvious, just in front of us. And I think Georgia, being the small country, still has its role in this war, and still it is also threatened, much threatened by this war, because Georgia in a crossroad of Europe and Asia. Georgia has a neighbor, northern neighbor, Russia, and we are in quite an unexpected war with Russia in 2008. Georgia is near to times heard from terrorist organizations, maybe Georgia will be of terrorist acts. So we are not out of the play of the big game. The problem is that we are threatening, we are facing threat, but we are more with protection. In Georgia, we are not members of NATO, but in Georgia, we have lots of NATOs inside the name of Georgia, in Georgia. And we call in our families, we have lots of NATOs, and we are strong in this regard. But we are not members of the North Atlantic Alliance, and we don't have this kind of protection that creates too much problem in Georgia when we're facing different conflictual situations and confrontations. Now about region. Region is also problematic. Previous session, the Vice President of the European mentioned Black Sea synergy approach from the European Union. Black Sea synergy strategy, and he needs strategy, political strategy, I think. Problematic to have the political strategy because the region is mostly geographic region, rather political region, because it's quite diverse. I have one strategy between Georgia, Ukraine, and Russia, because these are the Black Sea countries, but how common political, joint political strategy can be achieved among these countries, because we are involved in, Ukraine is involved in war, Georgia was involved in war, but we are in a hotspot at the moment, because war ended in 2008, but still we have conflictual situation with our neighbors. Is in this problematic geostrategic territory. And we also care about general approaches to the threats. And shortly, in the second part of my presentation, I would like to talk about the terrorism. And also is done against terrorism, but much more have to be done. And as I said, I would like to say what are the mistakes we are making. First of all, this is uneven approach to the terrorism, because the problem is identified. Terrorism is our problem, but world powers that can defeat terrorism are not together, and they are diverse, centralized. The clear example of this is Syria, and Syria war, where different states, world powers are involved in the problem. For example, they're fighting against ISIS, but they are not together. For example, USA and Russia both fight against ISIS, but they are not together. And they have different approaches with Assad regime. They have different approaches with ISIS. The problem is one, but approaches are different. And this weakens our side, and this makes stronger the terrorism side. Another issue, how we call the terrorists, how we identify the terrorists. I'm actually observing the USA elections and the speeches of the candidates, how they react to these ongoing issues. I heard from one candidate, Rubio, that this is a clash of civilization, and either we will win or either they will win. We heard from Donald Trump that we have fight with Muslim world, we have Islamic world. And I think this is the biggest mistake that we are, and I don't think it is no problem of USA, several European states, we heard this kind of statements. This is a big problem, because if we call the criminal organization to be representative of whole Islamic world, if we call this terrorist organization to be civilization, it is not Eastern civilization. You know what is Eastern civilization? It is much bigger than ISIS, it's much bigger than Al-Qaeda. And we cannot say that we have fight and war with Muslims, because to take example of Georgia, in Georgia, the population, Muslim population in northern part of Georgia and neighboring territory, and from Georgian territory, some Georgians went to Syria to fight and to become members of ISIS, and they are fighting, but they are some 5 or 6 people from Georgia, from Muslim population, and we have much more population, but I don't think the rest population are also terrorists. These 5 people representing some kind of Eastern civilization or Muslim world. That is a problem, because making this kind of statements, we help terrorist organizations to have much productive propaganda. Imagine the people living in a poor Middle East. Imagine people living in a situation when they have nothing to lose, and this strong terrorist organization with strong financial resources go there and have quite strong propaganda saying that we represent Caliphate, Islamic State, that they call themselves to be Islamic State, not one single, some kind of, they call themselves to be something big and creating something big. And in this regard, if we call them that they are Islamic States and they are Caliphate, they become much more stronger, because they recruit new followers, and these new followers think that they do not think that they are becoming terrorists. They think that they represent Islamic world, they represent Muslim world, and they defend their own big Islamic State. So I think this is the big mistake if we do not be concrete when defining the threats, because our threat is the criminal terrorist organizations, which are not much big, and I would like to join the efforts of the big players in the world, not to make them stronger by our mistakes. This was my short presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Celice. Now we are moving to a voice from the NGO perspective, from Moldova actually. Our speaker is an expert in European program management and a foreign policy expert. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. With your permission, I will speak from here. Thank you very much for inviting me, first of all, and for having this opportunity to discuss this very important topic, and I mean the security topic. In Moldova, unfortunately, we are not raising so often this issue, although for us it is also a very quite important one, taking into account the situation in the eastern region. I would like to mention that indeed in a new era we are facing new security challenges, and the ones that we are facing at the moment is the hybrid warfare and of course the propaganda and the informational war. To be sincere, I guess 4 years ago or 5 years ago, when we were discussing the security strategy of the Republic of Moldova, we didn't even mention in the strategy the informational security. And this was one of the issues that were raised by the civil society when we were debating the document. And then we didn't even thought about such a security threat. Now we see that this is a real threat, and practically sometimes it's even worse than a violent conflict, and it has the repercussions even worse than a violent conflict. After the annexation of Crimea, Moldova started to face a difficult problem, and this is mainly the propaganda and the Russian propaganda in Moldova. As you know, unfortunately, the media environment and the informational space of the Republic of Moldova is controlled a lot by the Russian media. And this is why Moldova has to face a lot of disinformation regarding different kind of topics, from social ones to political ones. I would say that in terms of soft power, the Russian Federation has reached a very high level in order to promote its interests on our territory. If we look at the polls of the public opinion, we will see that unfortunately the popularity of the Russian TV is quite increased, and sometimes it reaches up to 60% of popularity. And this is not because people like to watch it or really believe in the information that they are receiving, but they have this nostalgia for the past, and sometimes they are used to watch the Russian media due to the Soviet times. And this is why the level of popularity of the Russian media is so high. And of course, it is a very good way of promoting your interests, but also the information that you want that people receive. Unfortunately, I would also say that it has an impact on the minds of the people, because after the annexation of Crimea, also according to one of the public barometers of opinion, we saw that about up to 40% of the people considered that the annexation of Crimea was a legitimate act from the part of the Russian Federation. Of course, this is an information which after that can be discussed, because being addressed some other questions, these people have answered differently. But still, the fact that we have 40% of the people who somehow consider that this is a legitimate act, it means that the Russian propaganda has achieved its goal. At the moment, I would say that I think that this level decreased. We didn't put this question after that, but due to the securing the informational space, we try to avoid and to counterfight the Russian propaganda. It is also important to have the support of our partners in doing this, and NATO, it is of course the mechanism that the NATO is using, but also the European Union are quite important for us, but also for the region, because unfortunately by ourselves it is very difficult to fight the Russian propaganda. Also, one of the elements of soft power which is used by the Russian Federation is using the stereotypes that exist in the society, but also to base all the information that it is given to the space on the nostalgia, but also on the human dimension, because it is very easy to appeal to the human feelings, but also to the nostalgia for the past. So this is why on our path to European pattern of development, and during the negotiation of the association agreement, but also the implementation of the visa liberalization action plan, we faced a lot of disinformation which was coming from the part of the media, but also from the part of the civil society organizations which were supported by the Russian Federation. This disinformation was related to very simple issues, but issues that appealed to people. Like, for example, if we will sign the association agreement, then the Europeans will come and will take your land. And you know how important land is for people. So there were these kind of messages that were related to their daily life, for example. So you will not be able to kill your animals in a certain way because there are some certain regulations. And this is how I would say that they have reached the ordinary citizens, and this is how this contributed to the decrease of popularity of the European Union somehow in the Republic of Moldova, because then people were saying, okay, but we don't want to give up our ordinary way of life. So then, of course, we are not supporting so much the European pattern of development. This is why we have to understand that this propaganda campaign, they are very efficient, and they are tackling issues that are related to human daily life. And this is how it is very easy to reach the minds and the hearts of people. Also, one of the elements of the propaganda, it is to use the language and the policy of compatriots in the eastern region, in the countries which formerly were part of the Soviet Union. And but I would agree with my colleague from Ukraine. For example, in Moldova, you will see that people are speaking freely in the Russian language. We have Russian language schools, and also in the autonomous region of Gagauzia, for example, and in the separatist region in Transnistria, people are speaking freely in Russia, and also the Russian language has the level of intercultural language. So in any way, the Republic of Moldova is violating the right of people to speak freely in an ethnic minority language, but they have also the possibility to study and to communicate even at the authorities level, because all the documents in the Republic of Moldova, they are also translated in Russia. And also I will mention here, some of our parliamentarians are speaking Russian, and they have Russian translation in the parliament. So it is, this information is very easy to combat when it emerges, but for that you have to have very efficient tools of communication inside the country, and to have a very good communication strategy at the governmental level. And this is something that we would like to, we have to establish in order to create a link between the government and the citizens, and to explain fully what the European Union means on one part, because this is our main foreign policy direction, and we would like to continue our European pattern of development, but also on the other hand to face the propaganda machine which is working from the part of the Russian Federation on the Republic of Moldovan territory. I know that we have very little time, so if there will be any question, then I will be very happy to answer to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victoria Bukatu, also to stay brief. Last but not least, we move on to Turkey. Ms. Denise is a Bulgarian journalist based in Ankara, which is probably not the easiest working environment for a journalist, as we could also see from the German point of view in the last couple of weeks, with some issues that we had with President Erdogan on the interpretation of the freedom of speech, also in the comments on how journalists have been treated, or given the number of journalists in prison in this country. So I very much look forward to hear your perspective from Turkey.
Здравейте! Благодаря ви. Първо искам да благодаря за поканата за участие в тази конференция. Това за мен не толкова удоволствие, а чест, защото аз съм родена в България, когато България и Турция бяха началните позиции, началните фронтови позиции на НАТО, а от 25 години живея и работя в Турция, с която сега България и Турция са съюзници в НАТО, и това е една много специална връзка между тях. Сега моята тема обаче е хибридните войни и тяхното отражение предвид на сигурността на Черноморския регион. Затова аз предпочитам да говоря по тази тема, понеже се подготвих по тази тема. Не знам какво ще каже ръководителят на панела, защото малко каза тук, че трябва да говоря за свободата на медиите, но аз се подготвих за черноморската тема. Какво ще кажете? Окей, я? Да? Добре, значи. Продължавам. Окей. Сега, както казах, аз работя и живея в Турция, която не е просто черноморска, а е ключова в този регион не от вчера или от днес, а от векове. И понеже в моето изложение е свързано с хибридните войни, ще кажа, че в наше време в инструментариума на хибридната война много активно се включват и медиите, което важи и за турските медии. И чрез тях, понеже се дава възможност за пряк достъп до противника. Тук противника може би ще трябва да го вземем в кавички, защото хибридната война вече това го посочиха и капацитетите, и специалистите. Там някак се размиват и понятията мир или война, което също е забележителен. Включва се и манипулирането на обществено, да се променят в една представите за това какво точно става в момента. И също така не на последно място, много често пъти политиците си измиват пешкира с медиите, когато направят грешки. Тук искам да разкажа за един случай на дезинформация, колко голямо значение е дезинформацията. Турските руски през месец ноември на Таксим, там където обикновено се намират колите за предаване на живо, директно предаване. Бяхме много журналисти и аз бях там. И аз предавах всъщност за това, защо е свален руския бомбардировач. До мен имаше и един военен експерт, когато интервюрах, който всъщност каза, че нали, няколко пъти, 5 пъти са предупреждавани пилотите, но те не са напуснали въздушното пространство и в крайна сметка преди това пък спомена за тези ангажиментите на Турция в рамките на НАТО относно охраната на въздушното пространство край границата с Сирия, с която е основната заплаха за сигурността на Турция откак започна гражданската война в Сирия. И след всичко това, след като говорихме тези неща, в слушалката чувам пък колегата от Москва, който всъщност започна да предава заплахите на Владимир Путин за това какво ще направи, какво ще последва, как ще накаже Турция за това, че са свалили самолета, че ще наложи санкции във всякакви заплаши, че веднага трябва да се върнат руските граждани в Турция. И така посочих този пример, защото той наистина говори за това колко важно значение има и колко често и колко активно се използва дезинформираността в процеса на хибридната война. Турция, колкото и някои да не искат да го признават, всъщност има сериозна и дълбока стратегия по отношение на Черноморския регион. Тя се базира на националните и регионалните интереси от една страна и от друга на принадлежността на Турция към евроатлантическите структури и на кандидатурата ѝ за член на Европейския съюз. Заема и позицията, че Турция, паралелно на Балканите, винаги е отделяла голямо внимание на сигурността на Черноморския регион, регион, който е с над 300 милиона население. Разбира се, страните в този регион не са на еднакво економическо състояние, но в същото време те пък, някои от тях са свързани с дълбоки връзки с Турция. И в същото време, понеже има уникалното местоположение да бъде хем в Европа, хем в Азия, а чрез региона, поставя на амбициите на Русия, която също иска да доминира в този. Медиите и хибридните войни много. Тук важно място се отделя и на тона на медиите, особено в кризисни ситуации, както е експанзията на Русия в Украйна. Медиите също втвърдяват своя тон. Това проличава. Например, Москва много добре знаеше колко е чувствителна Анкара по отношение на турската диаспора. Става дума и за кримските татари. Политиката на Турция е турските общности в съответните страни да бъдат спазвани тяхните права и свободи според законите на съответната държава, но въпреки това настъпи интересите на Турция и по-късно пък заби нож в гърба на Русия, както и се изказа Путин в медиите. Важен аспект на хибридната война е терминологията. Например, когато навлизането на руските войски в Сирия се превърна в хибридна война, от хибридна война се превърна в голяма степен и в показна, от една страна се получи демонстриране на военна сила мощ на Русия, а от друга дестабилизиране на Турция с кюрдския самолети всъщност бомбардира вместо Дааш местните сирийски тюркмени, които пък Русия ги нарича терористи, макар че те за Турция са тюркмени, към които тя има ангажименти относно тяхните права и свободи. Методите на хибридната война включват и пропагандното въздействие върху населението и страната, като кибератаки, провокационни действия. Пак ще се послужа с един интересен пример. Малко след като бе свален руският самолет, в Босфора навлезе руския крайцер, който трябваше да премине към Средиземно море. Само за секунда. 2 думи.
Okay, thank you very much. I was told by the organizers that we are terribly late, and I was given the chance to accept 2 questions. Given the broad variety of different topics, I apologize to interrupt you in the middle of your presentation, but I see you having 10 pages, and I think this would be a proper additional lecture. So I'm very sorry that I have to be that rude as a moderator, but we get the chance to accept 2 questions. The gentleman in the center, please.
Thank you very much. Името ми е Пламен Николов от Движение за енергийна независимост. Моята реплика е към професор Станчев. Радвам се, че толкова сърцат човек от българско потекло направи такъв добър преглед на руската пропаганда срещу Украйна. И ще добавя само едно изречение, за да напомня на него и на другите колеги, които присъстват тук, че един от първите, които изобличават великоруската пропаганда срещу Украйна, е болшевишкият водач Ленин, който говори срещу великоруското чванство по отношение на народите, населяващи Украйна, който говори против това, че е недопустимо да се използва термина Малорусия, унизителният термин Малорусия по отношение на народите, които населяват югоизточна Украйна, и който говори против фалшифицирането на украинската история в множество свои публикации. Вероятно това е и главната причина, поради която сега предстои болшевишкия водач Ленин да бъде низвергнат най-накрая в руската история, да бъде изваден от мавзолея, да бъде погребан, изобличен като антируски, така бих казал, исторически деец и погребан. Благодаря.
Само да добавя, че продължи делото на Ленин, ако се изразя нашият българин Христо Раковски, който е бил министър-председател на Украйна 1923 година, когато отива с визията да русифицира Украйна, обаче 1921 година въвежда украинският език в висши училища и казва на Москва: Украйна не е Русия.
Okay, the second one. The lady in the back.
Здравейте, казвам се, Ваня Григорова от КТ Подкрепа. Много интересни презентации чухме тук. Имам един въпрос към господина от Харковския университет. Разбрахме, че там са засегнати интереси на украинци в Крим, имам предвид на украинци и на турци, след това разбрахме. Някой интересува ли го обаче какво искат самите хора, самия народ на Крим, тъй като там беше проведен референдум все пак, към представителя на молдовското НПО. Стана ясно, че в Молдова трябва да се прави разяснение за това какво представлява Европейския съюз въобще. Някой в Молдова знае ли какво представлява Европейския съюз, за да може да го разясни на населението на Молдова, тъй като в България все още не знаем. И един въпрос много кратък към журналиста в Турция. Аз не ми стана съвсем ясна какъв е примера за хибридната война, когато разказвахте за сваления руски самолет, но смятате ли, че Турция, защото като говорим за хибридна война, той има хибридни действия от всички страни. Преди малко чухме лекция за военен пиар, с това започна този панел, след което обаче се оказа, че пропагандата е лошо. По същество пиара е също пропаганда и използва ли Турция такава пропаганда, когато става въпрос за действията и срещу кюрдите в самата Турция и за различните бойни действия, които се случиха в Сирия от страна на Русия и от страна на Турция? Благодаря.
Who likes to start? Maybe ladies first.
Сега мисля, че там бяха два въпроса ваши, да?
Yeah. Would you like to answer one?
Sorry?
Would you like to answer the one that was
Yes.
directed towards you?
Сега вие попитахте сега тук искам специално да направя разграничение. В Турция действително става дума за терора на Кюрдската работническа партия или ПКК, която действително си служи с терора, защото знаете, имаше и две нападения, два терористични атентата, с които са жертви. Така че в случая Турция наистина е изправена и пред тази заплаха, пред тази опасност, но пак искам да направя едно разграничение между кюрди и терора на ПКК.
Yes, so thank you very much for the question. Actually, it's a very relevant one because during the visa liberalization, but also during the association, the negotiation of the association agreement, we had the impression more that our authorities are talking to Brussels and communicating to them more than to their own citizens. So I think that this was one of the things that our government lacked at that moment, and this is where the Russian propaganda has picked up and tried to influence and to destabilize the situation in Moldova. I would say that our authorities realized a bit late that they need to communicate to their citizens and to the population, and then they started campaign of popularizing the European Union and the European Union support to Moldova. As you know, we are one of the biggest recipients of financial support in the European Union. So, but here we have two dimensions, because of course this is our national priority, and we have to be the ones who are explaining our population the benefit of joining the European Union and to deepen the relations with the EU. But at the same time, I think that there should be a bigger visibility policy from the part of the EU inside the country, which is also lacking, unfortunately. Now I know that the European Union is putting more efforts in order to be more visible due to the fact that their popularity really decreased during the last years. But I think that with joint efforts, we can put it back on track, and we can counterfight the massive propaganda which is coming from the abroad. Thank you.
И да ви отговоря какво си мислят какво мислят кримчаните или жителите на Крим, татарите, българите и така нататък. Последният така наречен референдум, защо така наречен? Защото 30% едва се явиха на референдум в основните части в Крим, освен Севастопол, където бяха 72%. Не коментирам как се е правил референдума. Начинът е горе-долу един същ, както на времето навлязаха германските войни в Судетската област и имаха 90% за присъединяването на Судетите към Германия. Същото стана и с Аншлюс на Австрия, така стана и с западните области на Украина, Буковина, Бесарабия, по време на въвеждането на съветските войски по силата на пакт Рибентроп-Молотов. Горе-долу сценарий е един същ. Въпросът е друг. Наистина, има си исторически корени за желанието на Крим да бъдат по-самостоятелна и това е уникален случай, когато в унитарна държава си има автономна република. Проблемът на Киев, че не обръщаха внимание на желанието не само на кримчаните, но и на регионите като цяло, и източните, и западните, да получат по-голяма самостоятелност. Аз съм бивш общински съветник от 90 до 95 година. Точно тогава се борихме, за да ни дадат тези пълномощия, да можем да си самоуправляваме на местата. Затова тези причини са доста. Желанието сега да затрият и татарски елемент в Крим си е обяснимо. Ликвидацията на Меджлиса си показател. На времето изселването на татарите, гърците, арменците и българите си показали. 12 000 и половина българи бяха изселени в течение на 2 часа на 27 юни. Само пример по едно село. Аз започвах своята кариера в Севастопол като преподавател. Село Марфовка, чисто българско, макар че там имаше нелегална организация, която се бореше срещу фашизма и се казваше Млада гвардия, след идването на съветските войски, цялото село е изселено в Пермска област. Вместо тях докарват 200 семейства от Тамбовска област. И изцяло след Втората световна война променят на статуса на кримчаните, аз имам предвид на етничите. След това, базирането на Черноморския флот, 4600 обекта. Строителство от страната на Москва, Мър Лужков, кмета Лужков строи жилища в нарушение на украинското законодателство с финансиране от Москва, жилища за запасните офицери, които си остават да живеят в Крим. Сега това, което аз знам, поддържам връзка с кримчаните, българите, приселват запасняците, които са ушли в отставка, служителите и сътрудниците на ФСБ. Така че нищо чудно няма, ако се промени изцяло състава на населението на Крим с определена цел за в бъдещето.
All right then. This is what happens if one puts 6 excellent speakers with such a broad variety of interesting case studies on one panel for which we have 1 hour. We remain with more questions than answers, which is actually what always happens in excellent seminars, that you don't have more answers than questions. But I think it was worth trying to represent almost the entire Black Sea region from the different perspectives of different stakeholders. And I think we all got a number of interesting insights and food for thought for further discussion. So it remains for me to thank not only the organizers and congratulate them to their 25th anniversary. It has always been a pleasure for us, the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, to have a partner with a similar commitment to promote a better understanding and not only to talk about others, but with others, which is also a recommendation for future events like this, that it would probably make more sense to invite even more actors and not only those who represent NATO, because then it would be interesting to hear what others have to say who are either accused or misinterpreted in their understanding. Because as I said in my introductory remarks, it's a lot about storytelling and what language does to create reality. But I think this is not the last opportunity. There will be more coming both in Bulgaria and what we do as the ICD around the world and not only in Berlin. So thank you very much to all the speakers. Thank you very much for the organization for setting this up. Thank you for the understanding that we didn't have the chance to have such a lively debate as we had before the lunch break. And I want to finish with a warning. I sometimes got the impression that if we talk about others' strategy and propaganda, there is a desire to do something similar, like kids in a sandbox. He has a bigger toy or a new one, and I want the same. We should not forget what NATO is meant for and what it is trying to defend. If we complain that Russia can set up something in 1 day and we could not, then it has a lot to do with the fact that this is an open society, and in open society, a pluralist discourse simply takes more time than if you have straightforward autocratic way of decision making. Probably more effective, but I don't want to be in a situation where we either have the propaganda tools in a similar way used on this side of the European continent, but rather feel that we don't have an equal footage when it comes to hybrid warfare and propaganda tools. On this not so happy note, thank you very much for your attention. And I think we will have a short coffee break now, or do we just continue? We don't even have a coffee break. Thank you very much for your attention. And I want you to join me for a round of applause. Thank you very much.